Hi, I'm Michelle and I do samples and make patterns for Lemon Lane. You might have seen some of my bags and pouches and purses on the shows on Create and Craft, and I'm going to show you now how to make them. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make the daisy pouch. It's a lovely curved shaped pouch, beautiful fitted lining, absolutely beautiful, and it's lovely for all your makeup. So to make this pouch, well, I've made mine in the heartfelt fabric for the main part of the pouch and the blush for the lining from Lemon Lane. And then you need your pattern pieces, which are already printed for you. You just cut them out, and you've got 3 pattern pieces for this. You've got your main body, which is also for your lining, and you've got a choice of 2 for your zippers. I'm using number 5 because that's my choice of zip, but you can use whatever you fancy. And then print off your instructions for the daisy pouch as well. And if you're like me and you're a visual learner, you've got this video as well, so really it holds your hand all the way through. So I'm going to start off with the outside piece, which is the front. That's the back actually, and this is the front. I put a label on mine so it says handmade. That's just because I like it. You don't need to do that if you don't want. We do have some labels as well that say handmade, so you could sew some in. If you're giving this as a gift, you could even wash this and you could put a label in that tells you how to wash it as well. So it's entirely up to you. So I'm just going to do a base stitch all the way around the edge to attach my foam to my bag. And then make sure that everything stays in place. You can find when you're sewing foam all the way around, it might move a bit and you might need to do a bit of a trim, but just do the best that you can. If you're feeling a little bit unsure, then just use your clips. Things don't usually move when you've got your clips. I'm just going at a nice speed, one where I know I can control my machine. And we're just going to do some boxed corners on this actually, so I want to show you another technique now and how to make really smart, perfectly fitting box corners. I'm just sewing it all in place, and the foam doesn't seem to be moving much, which is nice. And then just try and hold it all in place, round we go, and then just one more. And we're doing this right at the edge of the fabric because we certainly don't want to be sewing into our seam allowance. There, that's all fit now. I'm just going to take off any stray threads, get them out of the way. And we're sorted. So now we're ready to do our zip. These are our lining pieces, which we'll look at in a moment. And we're ready to do our zip. I've already put one of the zipper tabs on already. This is the number 5 zip, like I said earlier. And I'm going to show you how I like to attach my zipper tabs. I'm just going to put my stitch length back down to 2.5, regular stitch length, and I'm going to lay my zipper tab over my zip. And I've folded my zipper tab in half and then to the middle and over again. So you've got 3 creases, but like 4 folds, and you're going to just actually sew down the first crease just to hold it in place onto your zip. It makes it nice and secure and nothing's going to move afterwards. So that's why I like to do it this way. So then you're going to fold right over, and then as you can see on the back, we've got all these raw edges. Looks a bit untidy. And we're just going to fold it over, and now that's all hidden. So then I'm just going to up my stitch size, not too much, maybe 3.5, and I'm going to just sew my zipper tab on. Now when you're sewing this, so that you can catch the back as well as the front, I've got my foot up to the edge of my zipper tab, but my needle is further in, so that it will catch it on the back when you're sewing 9 times out of 10. Because if you don't catch it, you're going to have to unpick it and do it all over again. So now it's all caught, and we're just going to cut the ends off, flush with the zip. And because I did a bit of back stitching, it's not going to fall off. There we are. And we've got a lovely, tidy zip. So now what we need to do, I've put some markings onto the daisy pouch from a pattern. So you don't need to remember where they are, they're from the pattern. I'm going to flip my zip over, and I'm going to clip it into place. Because I want to make sure that when I sew this on, I'm going to baste it first. I want to make sure that it's as even as it possibly can be. And this is a curve, don't forget, so I'd pin both ends and try and make it marry up nice. So we're just going to put these clips in, and then we can get sewing. And you want it nice and taut, but not pulled really tight. So it's important when you did measure your zip in the first place that you didn't have it pulled really tight to do that. But you don't want it baggy either, so it's just getting it right really. So now we're going to do bigger stitch length, just so that we can get my zip in place. Take my clips out as I go. If you're an experienced sewer and you're happy to put this and your lining in at the same time, then do whatever you can do. Even though I do this all the time, I still like to sew this way. I think it's a foolproof way, and it's a good way of making sure that everything sits nicely and I get the look that I want at the end of it. So take my threads off again, keep cutting your threads off as you go. And we're going to take our lining piece and we're going to put it right sides together, and then we're going to clip this in place as well. So clip both ends. You could notch your fabric and start from the middle if you wanted. But these pattern pieces are very accurate, and as long as you've cut it the same size as the pattern, you won't have a problem. So now make sure my zipper is out of the way, and it's not, so I'm going to pull it right round. So from whichever side you're most comfortable, and that seems to change every time I sew. So as long as you're comfortable and happy. Sometimes you like to sew from the foam side, but there's no stitch line to follow because that was just a basting stitch. We're now doing a proper stitch that I've just realised is totally on the wrong stitch size, and my zipper drop out. So let's just, I don't need to pull the stitches out, but I just need to start again from the beginning and go over those stitches that I've just done. That's it. Now we go along, and let's just call that a reinforcement stitch, shall we? Well, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So along we go. and then I can feel there where the zipper pull is. So I'm just going to stop, lift up my presser foot, and actually if you turn it towards yourself and pull the zipper away, it's a lot easier than trying to pull it from the side. Back down. Don't forget, I'm not looking at my needle. I'm not interested in that needle at the moment. I'm just looking at somewhere on my presser foot that I want to follow to make sure that my stitch line is straight. Even though we're a curve, I still want it to be even. And it is. So once again, cut off our threads. We're going to open, we're not going to open anything actually, we're going to make our stitches wider. So now we're going to do a top stitch. So I've opened my zip and I've pushed my seams towards the front and my lining towards the other side because I don't want to catch my lining in this, because it makes it a lot easier to sew when you're putting it all together because of the zipper tabs. So now I'm just going along, and once again I'm not looking at my needle, I'm looking at my presser foot, and I've got a marking in the centre of my presser foot which I'm using to make sure that my top stitching stays as neat and straight as it can around these curves. So just make sure you keep catching your actual seams as well, because you're trying to stitch them in at the same time. And I'm running my fingers along the zip to make sure that I'm pushing the actual front of the fabric away from the zip, so it's even there as well. And then I'm going to leave my needle down, lift up my presser foot, turn my fabric so I can get my zipper pull out of the way. Let's just pull it, that's it. Put my presser foot back down, make sure everything's pushed under where it should be. And sew to the end and do a back stitch. And that's the front done. Chop off our threads. Push the lining down at the back, and this is where you'd, at home you would definitely press this. Keep that iron going. Make everything as perfect as you can, because it makes every step so much easier. Make sure we're perfect. So now we're going to take our back, I'm going to line that up, flip everything over, and we need to clip the back to the zipper tabs because we're going to baste them in place. And how I'm lining this up is I'm looking at my edges here and I'm wanting to make sure that everything's flush. And then when we sew this on, it should all fit lovely. And just get another clip, because it fights you a little bit with it being curved. It's such a lovely shape, it's well worth the extra little bit of effort. So now we're already on a bigger stitch because I've just done some top stitching, so I'm just going to leave it on that to baste on my zip. I'm going to back stitch as well, even though I'm basting it, just so it doesn't come undone. And take the clips out as I go. Just think how many Christmas presents and birthday presents you could make with these patterns. They're just so suitable, and one of the patterns, if you made it in a more darker colours, you could, you know, make a different look altogether. So it's up to you. So now we've got this in place, and we can see that from the front, this is all working lovely. Now we've got to put our back lining on. So push it back to where it was. And to make sure that you've got your lining on perfect and in the right spot, it's lining to lining. There we are. Just clip it all in place. And then make sure front to front, front to back, lining to lining, open it up. Where's my zipper? Pull, it's over there, I don't want it there, it needs to be out of the way. And check my stitch size and off we go. Once again, look at your foot, not your needle, as you sew along. And if you do, so say like you're sewing along here now, and you go a little bit wonky, just take it out of the machine, go back a few stitches, and carry on. It doesn't really matter. As long as you, in the end, get a nice straight stitch, nobody will ever know. So we're just going to move our zipper pull out of the way, lift up the zipper foot. Just stop a minute. Can we just stop a minute? It won't go for some reason. I'm going to have to take it out. I don't know what's happened here. Don't want that bit. That's it. So shall I say take your zipper foot out of the way? I could have my hand there, couldn't I? Right, okay. You need to take your zipper foot out of the way and then carry on to the end. Just making sure you line up as you go. Last bit. We've got all bits off. It's cotton. So now we're ready to do our top stitch. And this time we want 3 pieces of fabric, the front and the 2 linings to one side. And we need the back and the seams to the other. So the best thing to do is open that zipper, get it under your machine, line it up to where you want to do your top stitching. We're going to do, right, let's just stop there. We've now got threads going funny. Okay. What's happened here? Goodness me. It's all going swimmingly, isn't it? Right, here we go. Is it? Right, when we're going back to, just pop it in the machine. Yeah. Okay, I'm ready. Just keep making sure that you get your seams as you go along. So you're pushing your seams underneath and you're making sure that you're pulling the back away from the zip, and this is how you'll get it to look really neat. So underneath, push away from the zip, otherwise it'll just want to curl in itself because we're going around a bit of a curve. And this was obviously just a little bit harder than doing the front, because you've got more layers to contend with. Lift your zipper foot up, move your zip out of the way, back round again, push it down and away from your zip, and just keep going to the end. So that's the outside now of our bag done. So if you're at home making this bag, you just need to give it a good press now. Make it all press into place, because it wants to roll here where the zip is, and you want to push that with your iron. You want to press it into place just to give you a better finish around the top. But you can see what it's going to look like. We're getting there. And now we're going to do the box corners. You can print off the instructions that'll show you how to do them, but also the video will really help. So to do this, we're going to open up our pouch. It's a good idea to open up your zip at this moment, should I say, just so you don't forget later on. And then we're going to put front to back and clip. And we're going to do the same with our lining. So we've got a few clips here. There we go. And then we want to clip our sides. So this time, before we can do the box corners, we need to make sure that our sides, our zipper tabs are pushed towards the lining, and we're going to make sure that these sides are really well lined up. We want front to back and lining to lining where they meet. And then just going to clip down the side, flip it over, push the zipper tab towards the lining, and then once again we're going to line up these little edges together. So the bits that are going to be noticeable if we don't get them right. And then we're going to do exactly the same down this side, but on the lining, if you want to make a tighter lining, we're going to make a bigger seam allowance, but I'll tell you all about that once we get to it. So just clip your lining, and then we'll start sewing again. The most important part of these box corners, they're all important, but the most important ones are the ones that's on the front and back of the bag. So first of all, I'm going to sew our seam allowance with the right stitch length, regular stitch length, to the bottom of the bag. So we're going to be closing the bottom. I want to actually back stitch again, and then off we go. To the end. And this would be a similar, will it be the same if you did this on a tote, or once you've learnt this technique, you'll use it on so many different projects. So it's a good one to master, really. So we're going to do the sides, and we're only going to do up to where they meet. We're not going to go onto the lining yet. So I want to make sure that everything fits perfect. I'm sewing along the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Going to double check where these lay, make sure they aren't shifted and they're together. I'm just going to take as far as they go. That's it. Then we're going to do the other side. exactly the same as I did a second ago. A bit of bulk here. We're fine. And then just double check that this is all lined up. And take to the end. Snip off our threads as we go. End up with a lot of these. And then let's just check that yeah, that's nice. Let's check this side. Yes, that's lovely as well. So happy with that. So now we've got to do the base, and I should really write on my openings because I forget. It's just a thing I tend to do. So there we are. So hopefully that'll remind me. So now we're going to do the sides, and we're going to do this bit of base, but we can't take too much because we've got to get our hand in, but we need to take enough so that we can do these box corners. So I know with the Lemon Lane fabric that I want to take mine to 3/4 of an inch rather than 1/4 of an inch, just to give me that tighter lining. If you're really new to sewing, I would just do your 1/4 of an inch to start off with and then go around and tack a bit more if you dare. It's something you can get better at as you go along. Those of you who've been sewing forever, you've probably already done this. Those of you who get better, what were I saying then? Oh, that were all right, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry, I thought, what have I said? Where better go back from those of you. Sorry. Just doing the same here, 3/4 of an inch, remembering to stop, back stitch so it doesn't come off when I turn it. Get rid of all these threads. And now we're going to do up the sides. So this is where we start. If we're starting at the bottom, we start off at the 3/4 of an inch, back stitch. We're going to sew up the side as far as we can, really, till you'll know when you can't go any further because your press foot won't go because of all this bulk here. Then we're going to turn it slightly off to the side, enough to be able to carry on sewing at a diagonal and meet up with those stitches that we did earlier. And that's back to your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And we're going to do exactly the same on the other side. So 3/4 of an inch. If you're using a thicker lining, you're going to have to gauge how much extra you want to take off your lining, or if at all. And how you like your bag to look as well. That's a big factor, isn't it? So now we've gone as far as we dare. I'm going to go to a diagonal and sew across to end up back at 1/4 of an inch. So now we've done all the sides and everything. So what I want to do now is I want to cut off my bulk before I do my box corners. So I'm just going to cut on a diagonal there because I don't want to cut away this middle bit because I need that to go into my seam to close the pouch up. So then I'm going to cut my seam allowances basically in half, keeping well away from my stitches. I don't want to jeopardise the strength of the bag. I just want to get away some bulk. Same here, but I'm only going to chop up the sides. I'm going to forget this middle bit at the minute. Same here, this side. It's amazing how quick they come together, isn't it? So chop that off. Now when it comes to the lining, I'm going to do more than half because the seam allowance was so much bigger. Same the other side, not too near the stitching. And then, this is the scary bit, we're going to go really near the stitches but not that close that it's going to fall apart. But we just want to get rid of this bulk, because if you don't do that, you're going to have to take all that through your needle as well as your bag, and it just doesn't like it at all. Unless you're on an industrial, or you're on a semi-industrial, or a machine that you know can handle bulk. This machine doesn't particularly like it. So now we're ready to do our box corners. We have to do those before we do anything else. Otherwise we'll end up with 4 holes in our little pouch. So we're going to, so I'll just show you again. So this is where we're at. We've got a little cutout shape. We're going to turn the bag, open it up and pull it. So you've got seam to seam. We're going to open up them seams, or you can nest your seams by pushing them together like that. It's however you want to do it. Whatever makes it sit really good. So I want to look inside, and they look pretty well lined up to me. I'm going to put a clip there, and you need to make sure that you do pull the line in so that you've got a nice flat line here and it's not curved, or you're trying to get a really good boxed corner. Do exactly the same on the other lining. So I'm going to open my seams. And then if you'd have pressed all this, it'd sit even better. Line them up together. Pull it straight. Put a clip. Make sure that you're not catching out. And then we're going to do the main part of the bag. Now this is the most important bit, because this is the bit that everybody will see if you're miles apart. You know, sometimes I don't get it spot on, which isn't really noticeable, but if it's like that, people are going to see it. So you've got to try and get it as near as you can. So once again, you've got to check where your seams are lying, press them, get that clip in, make sure that it's pulled really straight, put your clips in. Then again on this side, I'm opening up my seams, and then just making sure that they're really well lined up, best that I can do. Put my clips in. You see, and we're ready to go. So I think I'll get the lining ones done first, and we're going to continue with that big seam allowance on the lining. Just so straight across. Here we are. Maybe back stitch over the actual seam itself, just for a bit of extra strength. Got all my threads, check my work. And that is very close. I'm happy with that. So because I'm happy with it, I'm going to take off my excess seam allowance. Ready to do the next one. If you chop it off before you check it, you're a bit stuck, aren't you? So I like to just check mine. and back stitch. Along we go. Pull that out. They look like they're nesting nicely, fingers crossed. Back stitch over that seam allowance and to the end. Chop off our excess threads. I didn't check it, just done exactly what I told you not to do. That's me all over, I'm a rebel. So, but it's perfect. That was lucky, wasn't it? I'm only trying to help you. And if I'm telling you stuff that needs to be done, it's because I've already done it wrong many times. So, just going to do our regular seam allowance. On the outside of the bag. Now this is a bit where we've really got to try and get those seams lined up. Oh, let's hope it doesn't move. Chop my threads, check my work. Up. Oh yes, I'm happy. So now we just got to do the other side. And just check those seams. Stop holding my breath. Right, hopefully we've got another one that's spot on. Not bad. Not as good as the other, but you know what? It's good enough. When I press that, you won't notice. It's not bad at all. Happy. Happy enough. Just going to take just a little bit of this seam allowance down, getting rid of our bulk. Not quite as important as around the top where you try to sew again. We've already sewn here, so that's pretty good. And we're ready to turn our pouch. So we left the opening. Just got to turn it all through. Just get it started off. You just got to turn it gently. You don't want to be ripping anything. Not that it would be the end of the world, because you just sew it back up again. So now, I'm going to push those corners out, and don't forget, this is where we had a sewing machine, if we had an iron, we could press them really neat. That's one. That's the other. And that's the one that I'm saying I didn't do as good, but you know what? It does, doesn't it? And I'm being overcritical. So we're going to push those sides out. And don't forget, you can't push them out with your finger. You can use a knitting needle, a chopstick, anything that's, you know, pointy, but don't use your scissors. if you can help it, because you're probably going to go straight through your fabric. Right, so we've got that lovely, if we was ironing that now, look how lovely and straight those sides would be, and that's what we're aiming for. Lovely. Got a little thread there. Let me just get my scissors. Don't want that thread. There we are. Just push everything in. We didn't push the sides out of his lining because you've only got to push them back in again. Let's just check that if this was ironed, would this all sit lovely inside? And yes, it would. It's a lovely tight lining. So now we can sew everything up. So take your lining back out, because if you weren't happy at that point, you are in a position to turn it all back through, take a bit more off your lining, make it a bit tighter, do whatever you need to do. If you're happy, just do the last bit. So now I've just got to try and get this lining all lined up, which isn't too hard, just it's getting your edges really. Clip it. This is where you could hand sew it, or if you're sewing it on your machine, I'd recommend when you're at home sewing it with a matching thread, matching colour. But for this demonstration, I'm just keeping the same thread in. I'm just going to pop it under my machine. I'm going to start it off. A little bit of a back stitch. And then just follow your lining. Going as near to the edge as you can, but catching both the front and the back. If you go too near the edge, you might not catch it all, and then you'll still have a gap. I'm just going to back stitch again. Check the work. Yep, happy with that. Get rid of all my threads. There we are. Look over here. Push the lining in, which is very easy because, like I said earlier, we didn't push those out. So now you've got a lovely tight lining, and that's before it's even been ironed. Then the zip closes lovely, perfect zip, lovely curve on the bag, nice top stitching. I'd put my label a bit straighter, I think. There we go. And here we have the daisy pouch.